Hey, welcome back to BB's Finds. I'm Blake B. This is a channel where I discuss all my mostly thrift store finds, various collections. I've already done 3 episodes. The first one was on my small laser disc collection. Second one was on my autograph books. Some of my autograph books, probably 80, 75, 80% of them. And then yesterday we did a cool Star Wars fanzine from 1977, October of 77. Today, as you can see, we've got the word Kirby right underneath me. We're talking about Jack Kirby, specifically his DC, his early DC work. I'm going to talk a little bit about history, which I do on these clips, if applicable. But with Jack Kirby, there's tons of it, as well as some of my opinions and thoughts and ruminations about his works. This piece right here is a Jack Kirby coffee table book. It basically delves into the history of Kirby, throughout time with comics. So he started off as a kind of an independent dude. It slowly got picked up by other comic companies as an artist. He was not so much a writer as he was an artist, but we'll get into that a little bit more. He created with Joe Simon the earliest incarnation of Captain America before Captain America was even a Marvel comic or a property of Marvel Comics. He's known mostly for his Marvel work. The comics that he created include, I mean, it's just like pretty much the hit list of everything. But it's X-Men, Fantastic Four, the Incredible Hulk, Iron Man, Thor. The list goes on and on. Again, today I'm going to be talking about mostly his DC work. So he when sorry about that. When Kirby was working, when he got hired with Marvel, he was working mostly with Stan Lee, kind of hand in hand, coming up with the stories. Stan Lee would take credit for the story writing, and Kirby would take credit for being the artist. However, there's a little bit of a dynamic that's similar to a Steve Wozniak, Steve Jobs thing, where Stan Lee was more of the face of the thing, and Kirby, at least I consider Kirby to be more of the, at least through his art, more of the writer of the stories and kind of coming up with the ideas and probably bouncing them off of Stan Lee. Stan Lee would then take the Kirby stories and expound on them. So I think that Kirby had an idea of narrative, storytelling narrative in this form that he could basically just draw and then create the narrative from his works. One thing that's very unique about Kirby is he was a U.S. veteran. He was drafted into the military right around the time of World War II, 1943. He landed on Normandy Beach 2 or so months after D-Day. So he did see some stuff. There's some clips online on YouTube that I've seen before where he discusses his time in war. And he did see some things. And I like to think that a lot of the work he did after that. Well, most of his body of work was after World War II, but a lot of the things that he was internally dealing with from being in such an ugly conflict, kind of came out through his writing, and that's sort of how he dealt with it, like therapeutically. Trying to think what else. Captain America. He wrote Captain America with Joe Simon before World War II conflict, and then the Captain America character was kind of this underground thing, and then once it got to Marvel, it became bigger then. And now, if you think about it, I mean, Kirby is pretty much the basis, or the main basis or main influence for all of the Marvel movies, because we have the Avengers. Well, we started with Iron Man, Avengers, Hulk, Iron Man, X-Men. Yeah. I mean, because it's really not Marvel property. It's still kind of, there's still kind of all the Fox type movies, but he does get credit for coming up with those characters and creating those dynamics and relationships among the characters, and um, a lot of crossover among the books too. Sometimes you'll see some like Spider-Man in the Fantastic Four, early Fantastic Four, and this is not even to mention the characters that he came up with. Side characters such as Galactus, Silver Surfer, things like that. I Silver Surfer is one of my favorites, so that's why I mention it. But I don't consider him a side character much, but Galactus for sure a side character, because without Silver Surfer you can't have Galactus, and likewise. Kirby, let's think about this. So he in the 1960s, in the 50s and 60s, he was writing for Marvel. Decided to make a switch to DC I believe it was sometime in 1970. He moved to California, moved to Thousand Oaks, which is my hometown. He lives, if anyone's from there watching my channel, he lived pretty close to the Thousand Oaks Library, right off of Herbs Road, and kind of behind there on that hill. It's pretty cool that he has some connection to where I'm from. I feel kind of a kinship with him. He was also Jewish. He's born Jacob Kurtzman in New York City. He's kind of, if anyone ever heard him talk, he talks like a very classic New Yorker. I would say he has what I call a cool voice. For a New Yorker, is kind of an old man New York voice. Very kind of gruff, but you can tell the guy had like some very like an onion, like many layers to him in terms of what he thought and what he was thinking. If you ever look at his works, it's so detailed, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and that's why he's the king. That people call him the king of comics. So anyway, let's talk about his DC work. So in 1970, he moves to Thousand Oaks and starts working for DC. So he did a number of DC books. Let's kind of work our way backwards. So I've got some newer stuff here to show you from my collection that his sort of collected works, trade paperbacks and things like that, and then I have some single issues. So let's work our way backwards. So first up, we have some stuff that's influenced by his New Gods work. So we have a Jim Starlin book. Jim Starlin's the guy who did the original Thanos stories and Infinity Gauntlet stories that begat the Infinity Wars and Endgame and things like that. The movies, that is. So we have Starlin's Death of the New Gods. This is influenced by the New Gods is a concept wholly derived by Kirby, and this has a nice picture of Darkseid on the back. There you go, Darkseid. Now Darkseid's a hero, an anti-hero. There's a super villain, I guess you can call him, that's never been in a DC film. If it was up to me, I would have put him in the Justice League movie instead of Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf is, he's prevalent throughout some of the DC books, but he's not like an alpha character, like akin to like a Penguin or Joker or Riddler in Batman. He's more of a tertiary. I put him at maybe like Egghead or Mad Hatter or something like that. Solomon Grundy. He's not so much a big name. I would have definitely, if I was going for that, the true vibe of the movie, I would have definitely done Darkseid, just because he's definitely more of a Thanos type character. And I think what happened was DC was trying to beat the Infinity War movies to the punch and try to put something like kind of like that together. If you look at the two movies, they're like very thematically similar. What's at stake, the world, reality. Steppenwolf, he's no Darkseid. I would say Darkseid could, if we're talking suit just powers straight up, I'd say he's probably more powerful than Thanos, because Thanos is really nothing without that Infinity Gauntlet. Darkseid he comes from the planet Apocalypse, and part of the New Gods. He's sort of like the main villain in the New Gods. Okay, so that's Death of the New Gods, influenced by Jim Starlin. Here we have Tales of the New Gods, a trade paperback. Let's see, is this a graphic novel? Might be a graphic novel. No. Trade paperback. This is all from Fourth World, Jack Kirby's Fourth World, which includes Mr. Miracle, New Gods, Forever People. And yeah, a lot of these come from the Mr. Miracle books. Mr. Miracle is sort of like a Houdini type character, an escape artist. A lot of this stuff is very esoteric. So this is Tales of the New Gods from some of the original Kirby books. Let's see here. Yeah, these were some '80s Kirby books when they kind of revived the Fourth World in the mid '80s. So so that's that, and then I've got the trade paperback of the original run of the New Gods. Now, what's unique about this is George Lucas read this whole run before he did Star Wars. This was sometime in the mid '70s. Kirby did these books. Let's see. 70 through 73 was the original run of the New Gods. So Darkseid's like the main antagonist, and then you've got Orion as one of the main protagonists. Very esoteric, very steeped in mythology, very heady stuff. Of course, the art is fantastic. You can't beat Jack Kirby when it comes to pretty much any type of comic book art. I would say, bronze, silver, golden age, just all over the place. And here's a picture of Darkseid. He says, "I hear you, Orion. The battle beckons." There's Darkseid right there. So that's New Gods, trade paperback. Now, working our way through some of the single issue DC stuff. We talked a little bit about the Fourth World. He also did a series of books called Commandy, The Last Boy on Earth. Commandy was a bit like, I would compare it to almost like a Planet of the Apes situation. A guy wakes up and he's basically the reality is completely changed. He's in this world it's Earth, but it's overrun by these like beasts that are kind of anthropomorphic, animals and things like that. So here's Commandy number 2. This also was 70s. I believe it was 70s, maybe late 60s. Commandy number 2. I had to buy this one at a comic book shop. I usually just go for Jack Kirby books when I'm at a comic shop rather than trying to just find things in the rough at thrift stores. And then here we have Commandy number 1. This is the first DC issue, 20-cent cover. Very iconic cover in that it's a little bit reminiscent of Planet of the Apes because it's got the Statue of Liberty on it. And here we have Commandy in a raft that's kind of around, where the Statue of Liberty is in New York City. So now we get into some Fourth World stuff. So I've got a copy of, I got a New Gods book. Bought this one at a comic shop as well for $5. I really don't, for some of this stuff, I really don't care what condition it's in because I'm not looking to, resell this stuff per se. So it's more just to read for reading enjoyment. This one was a $5 copy of New Gods 11. In mint condition it would be like, hundreds of dollars probably, but this is just stuff I like to read and enjoy. And then we have Forever People. So it's a collection of kind of, this is sort of like, I would say, sort of like his version of the Avengers when he was doing the DC thing. It's a 15-cent cover, number 2, Forever People. You got Infinity Man and Mark Moonrider, Big Bear, Viking the Black, Seraphan, and Beautiful Dreamer. And then Mantis is the big bad in this one, in this version, or this book. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about his first works at DC. This is this is very interesting because of the way Kirby came to DC and the books he decided to write for his first stories. he started implementing the seeds of the fourth world, New Gods, Forever People, Mr. Miracle, in these books, in these early books. However, he decided to kind of take over a book that had been ongoing, and that book was Superman's ex-pal Jimmy Olsen. So here we have a copy of Superman's ex-pal Jimmy Olsen, number 133. This is the first time Kirby wrote for DC. So up here we have got Kirby is here. So this is the first book, kind of heralding Kirby's introduction to writing DC stories. Again, he kind of took these things over. This was sort of a dying thing. I mean, if you were a kid and you saw this, Jimmy Olsen's pal Superman, you really wouldn't care. You'd want to read Superman, right? The stories are a little bit interesting. There's like a bunch of like toughs and hippies and things like that in the books that are, it's not so much big bads like you have in Batman or the Avengers or things like that. It's more just kind of like random guys that are kind of causing trouble that Superman needs to come help and stuff like that. And Jimmy Olsen's the main character, and he's got the Legion of Newsboys as well, which is which is kind of funny. This is old right here, Legion of Newsboys. So this is like Jimmy Olsen's kind of gang of people that help him solve these problems with all these toughs and crazy hippies that are actually violent hippies, which is kind of against anything a hippie's for. But so that's the Superman's ex-pal Jimmy Olsen 133. Up next, we have kind of the cornerstone of my Kirby DC collection. By the way, I found 133 and this next item both at a thrift store, $1 each, which is unheard of. I actually had to make a couple passes to find this one. This was a large collection that was. It took me a while to kind of get through at this thrift store. I probably made 2 or 3 trips, but the second go around, I picked this book up. I can't believe I missed it the first time, but here we go. Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen 134. Now, what's unique about this is it's the first appearance of Darkseid, and I am one to not be so protective of my stuff, so I will show you. This book's already kind of not in the greatest. I mean, it's in decent shape, but in terms of resale value, I mean, there's some stuff on the back, little stains and things like that, but it's still a cool thing to have. All right, so this is first appearance of Darkseid. It's more of a cameo appearance than anything. People refer to this book often, and I think it's starting to pick up steam as one of the more coveted issues from the Bronze or Bronze era / Kirby at DC era. Often mentioned just from a historical point of view. So there you have Darkseid in that panel. See him right there? He's like on a TV screen. This is the very first appearance of that guy. So what's going to happen is if now I'm going to kind of give you an economic lesson. So if Darkseid makes an appearance in a DC movie, a live action DC movie, blockbuster movie, like we're talking something to the level of the Avengers or any of the Batman movies that come out, something like that. What's going to happen to this book? The value is going to skyrocket, even in the shape that it's in. I'll give you an example of another book that just randomly took off in price. So there was a book called Giant Size Miss Marvel #1, more recent book. This was released, I think, like sometime 10 years or so before the movie Captain Marvel. So Giant Size Miss Marvel has the cat from the movie Captain Marvel. It's the first appearance of the cat, which is the craziest thing ever. The book was like a $5 book for the longest time, and then after the release of the movie, jumps to like $50, $60. But it's a new book. This is something that you can't just go into a comic book store and and buy for $1 or two. This is something you either need to find at a thrift store or a flea market type situation, or or else you're probably paying 100 200 plus dollars for a book this condition. I mean, in perfect shape, this would be probably $1,000 book. Maybe a little bit, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, but it's history. So it's history, and it's a little bit of economics as well. Trying to speculate on if and when Darkseid's going to actually make an appearance in a DC movie, which I think is pretty much going to be set in stone. Last I heard, Ava DuVernay was going to direct a New Gods movie, which means that there's a really good chance that Darkseid's in it. If he's not, DC's really dropping the ball. I know that it's kind of like very low hanging fruit to harp on DC movies. I personally couldn't make it through a couple of them. I'm not naming names, but there's a couple DC movies I started to watch that I stopped watching. And what's interesting is DC's got such a rich mythology in terms of the stories, in particular the Batman stories, and the different takes on Batman, and everything kind of just falls flat with the movies when they come out. They're going for more spectacle, I think, and trying to draw in audiences rather than story, storytelling or true to life comic book storytelling. And same can be said of Marvel movies. I mean, the Marvel movies have like that humor element that kind of takes you out of it sometimes. You're like, well, what am I actually watching here? But the books are funny themselves, so then there's some humor in them. So I'm hopeful that DC can get a movie right soon and get Darkseid, or someone of that caliber in as a big bad. So that's pretty much it. I truly appreciate Kirby and all he's done, and again, I think a lot of his art is kind of self-contained therapy for dealing with his issues in World War II and what he saw, and yeah, he brings me a lot of joy, and just looking at his art and reading his stories, even though he's not credited as the writer. Does bring me a lot of joy. Hope you're all well, and tomorrow we'll have something new. Always something new here, and we'll keep going. Hope everyone's well, and take care. Bye.